Training camps are open, which means holdouts are on, and the most contentious situation now in Las Vegas. New sheriff in town, Pete Carroll, making a stand, drawing a line in the sand, picking a fight with Christian Wilkins and the NFLPA. All that and more on today's Peacock and Williamson Mailbag.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock here, rolling solo. Matt Williamson on vacation, getting one last trip in before he heads to Latrobe, PA. He'll be back with me next week. So finishing training camp, the opening of training camp week here, solo with a little mailbag episode, tons of news to break down as camps are open around the NFL. And of course, as always, a bunch of great questions from our listeners that I'm going to dive into. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Do want to thank everybody for getting those questions in this week for this week's mailbag with me solo. And of course, all of our everydayers that hang with us all season long and off season long, especially, man. Love the everydayers that get us through the 6 weeks of non-football and non-news until we actually get now players on the field. And just seeing how rookies look out there, just seeing if they look the part in their first few days of practice and training camps has been a lot of fun. And really the biggest stories that we have to start with are guys that are not in their respective teams' training camp. Hendrickson, McLaurin, but we're going to start with Christian Wilkins. I mean, this is the story of the week and really kind of unprecedented as far as I can remember. And I have been doing this for a little while. A team going after a player's guarantees. Right? They're not guarantees if a team can suddenly just void those guarantees. And so the Las Vegas Raiders are releasing defensive tackle Christian Wilkins with the designation of terminated vested veteran. His time in Las Vegas is now over, according to Adam Schefter and many other reports now. Due to how Wilkins treated the rehab from his foot injury he suffered last season after signing a 4-year, $110 million contract, the Raiders voided the remaining $35.2 million guaranteed money left on Wilkins' contract. And today, Wilkins has filed a grievance with the NFLPA, which is just, I mean, that's just straight up picking a fight, trying to void a contract and get back guarantees because they are, after all, guarantees. And probably the timing of this, and look, we see teams and players and wrestling leverage from each other. You see a player ask for a contract when the team is really up against it at a certain position group. Seen it in San Francisco with Juwan Jennings. He had a nice year last year. And he's like, well, do you want to have nobody at wide receiver? Do you want to give me a little bit more money? He's not holding out, which is good news for the San Francisco 49ers, unlike some other players around the NFL. So Juwan Jennings is in camp. But on the flip side of that are the Raiders utilizing the weakness currently of the NFLPA, because the NFLPA right now is in turmoil with leadership right now. And so are they less strong as an organization to fight for one of their clients in Christian Wilkins? Adam Schefter goes on to say the NFLPA had 50 days to file a grievance on behalf of Christian Wilkins after the Raiders voided that, which I didn't realize they had done that 50 days ago or whenever that was, last month. So $35.25 million worth of guarantees voided on June 4th. It was the official date. $8 million for this year, $27.25 million for next year. The grievance was filed yesterday morning, Thursday morning now, and a legal battle awaits. And yes, of course, a legal battle is going to await there. And I mean, you're picking a fight essentially with the NFLPA and a player trying to avoid those guarantees. And I don't know what the CBA says on this specifically or what Christian Wilkins' contract says specifically, which could change this. But from my vantage point, I mean, to me, you give a player a contract and guarantees because you expect a certain thing. And I get that from the Raiders' perspective, but I I don't see how, even if he was on the couch eating bags of chips every day and not rehabbing at all, how you can go after his guaranteed money unless it's very, very specifically specified in his contract, right? According to Pete Carroll, he said there was not a clear path for Christian Wilkins to return to play and decided it was best to move on. So that's one thing in releasing a guy, and which is bad news for Wilkins getting another job anytime soon in the NFL and getting any money from anybody else to recoup some of those guarantees if he doesn't get them back and play football. So that's a big part of it, is the Raiders probably see this as they're not losing anybody, and it's like, why not try to get back some guarantees anyway, because Christian Wilkins was not returning quick enough. Now this is with the was the Liz Frank or the Jones fracture? I can't remember which one is now offhand for Christian Wilkins, but the nature of his injury is one that guys, and especially big men, have a tough time sometimes bouncing back from, and whether rehabbing it or not well enough, it's sometimes very difficult in a long road to get back from that type of a foot injury for some big players. So clearly Christian Wilkins not in a place where he's ready to play football. And Pete Carroll earlier this week, basically day one of training camp, at the podium telling reporters, we're going to win football games, and I don't care who hears me say that. He says, I would flexing a little bit, Pete Carroll, like a little bit ticked off Pete Carroll maybe. And really, I think flexing right now in Las Vegas, saying, yeah, don't forget about Pete Carroll. The guy wins 10 games every single year. We're not going to lose football games here. I don't care what the records have been in previous seasons for the Las Vegas Raiders. We're coming here. We don't plan to win. We are going to win games, and I don't care who hears it. And then they go do things like go after guarantees and get rid of big-time veterans who were just recently signed, although not on Pete Carroll's watch. So got a lot more interesting for sure in Las Vegas, and kind of piqued my interest. Okay, Pete, now you've talked the talk, and now let's see with your quarterback that you did win 10 games a year with, right, in Seattle, in Geno Smith. Let's see how that looks. You got a new shiny toy at running back, really the defense, and that's where Pete Carroll comes in and really has an opportunity to do the most work as a coach and a defensive guy that he is. Can he fix that Raiders defense behind Max Crosby and obviously no longer Christian Wilkins in the middle of that Raiders defensive line? So interesting team, obviously, in Las Vegas with the Raiders in a really, really tough division in the AFC West. Speaking of divisions, we finished our division series earlier this week, and we went through every division, all 8 divisions in the NFL, broke down every team, how they look, if they got better, some breakout players. And I've had a really fun time reading the YouTube comments, specifically from some fans having some battles and fighting about it. In some cases, agreeing with Matt and I, in some cases, disagreeing with Matt and I about our assessment of the teams. And I got to hand it to, I think, the NFC South, which was the most competitive, at least in our YouTube community, in our YouTube comments. And by the way, go subscribe on YouTube, drop a comment, drop a question. I'm going to hit some questions here in the mailbag from YouTube, as well as at BB Peacock, at Williamson NFL on Twitter is where we get most of our mailbag questions every single week. And Matt will be back in Latrobe, PA at Steelers training camp. We'll be doing our shows, and he'll be doing those shows from there starting on Monday. But Bucks fans versus Falcons fans has been a really fun one there. And I don't know if I even want to go through this and talk about some of the comments, but essentially it's like big brother, little brother syndrome with the Falcons and the Bucks from recent history. And some Bucks fans essentially saying, like, we're not worried about the Falcons. We hear this kind of crap every single year. You've been good twice in the last 10 years, maybe. Yeah, we're not too worried about it. And the Falcons fans coming back with essentially, look, we got a QB now. We got a defense now. You guys have been way better at quarterback and barely skating through the division. And now you've got some real competition at the top of the NFC South. So that one's going to be a lot of fun in the South. And hopefully those arguments continue in our YouTube community, in our YouTube comments, because I've had a good time. The Lions fans as well, a little bit upset, thinking that they might take a step back. And I don't see how. And look, when it comes to the Lions, solid NFC North rivalries as well, right? With the Lions fans and the Packers fans going to work. Not quite as good as the NFC South, but Lions fans, don't want to believe that a new offensive coordinator and a new center makes that big of a difference. among other things that have changed. I get it. The Lions, Matt and I said, look, you can't say that they got better necessarily from last year. I mean, injuries aside, injuries is a big way for them to actually be better or not get worse, even if they do get worse in some other areas. But it has to have an effect. And maybe they skate through. Maybe they're okay. But my response to some of these specifically is like, look, I think is it Nikki in the comments specifically? It's like, look, I mean, this isn't Madden. You don't get to go just plug in you don't lose a 95 at center and then plug in an 84 and you're like, oh no, we're good. Right. Just because a PFF grade might have looked good for a player at a certain position a couple of years ago. That's not how it works. And there's continuity on the offensive line. There's a lot that goes into it. And yes, they have a nice rookie that's promising and that they like, and they've shuffled some things around, and you can paint a very rosy picture of how you replace Frank Ragnow and how you replace the offensive coordinator, and you have to learn a new system, and there's familiarity and whatever it is. But in reality, you got to go out there and do it, and you got to go win the games. And, there's a lot of ifs and hoping there for the best outcome, but Lions fans seem to not be worried about the Packers, and the Packers fans are as good as they have been, and probably don't even know how to react to this, which is, I think, why there's been less competition and arguing in the comments, because Packers fans are like, well, wait a second, you've been the little brother my entire life. Why am I worried about you? Because you had a nice couple of years. We're really good, and we got a little bit better, and that's all we needed to do to go win the NFC North. So some fun conversations there, and a little bit of pushback, and great conversations revolving around our division preview. So go check those out. Every single division talking about who got better, and some sleeper players, some breakout players for 2025. Next, we're going to talk quarterbacks. We are going to talk Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks. Justin Fields avoiding a major injury. Some more holdouts as well in the NFL getting contentious. Next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime and the Gametime app. If you ever decided to go see a game last minute, go see a baseball game, happens to me all the time. In fact, I almost never plan to go see a baseball game. I know there's games every day, all summer long, right? So I know that I have the Gametime app in my front left pocket, and I can pull it out anytime and say, you know what, I'm gonna go catch a ball game. I don't care if it's after first pitch. I can jam into the city and go catch a San Francisco Giants baseball game. In fact, I might do it Friday night and go catch a ball game, because I can, and because you can get phenomenal last minute seats up to 60% off even after first pitch. Incredible deals, clear views from your seats, lowest price guarantees with the Gametime app that takes all the worry out of buying tickets. And how about saving so much money on tickets that you can splurge on maybe an extra beverage, food and drinks at the yard, or even invite a bigger group to come with you? Gametime makes it possible, whether it's Major League Baseball tickets, football tickets, NFL games, concerts, comedy shows, all of it. You can find those special deals at Gametime. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Trey Hendrickson has peaced out. He is no longer in the state of Ohio, and on social media showed a picture of him in the car entering the state of Florida, which apparently is where he makes his off-season home. And contract conversations fell apart with Trey Hendrickson, and they haven't really gone great, but they broke down over guaranteed money before training camp. Hendrickson now indicated he has left the state, and he has been placed on the did not report list for the Cincinnati Bengals. So that is now ongoing, and not a great situation for a team that really, really, really needs help on the defensive side of the football with the Cincinnati Bengals. And got to imagine that new contract signed by TJ Watt, which we'll talk about with Williamson on Monday, has a big part of this. And I really think that you can lump Trey Hendrickson and Terry McLaurin, who is also holding out of training camp, in a similar bucket, because Terry McLaurin did not report to camp with the Washington Commanders. He wants a big contract, a new contract. Wide receiver money is getting crazy. It's huge around the NFL. Defensive end, pass rusher money is huge. It's the biggest money in the NFL aside from quarterback right now. And so, in fact, wide receiver and defensive end are the biggest money in the NFL after quarterbacks. And Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson are really good football players. And they would be right to come to the negotiating table and have a dollar amount that is commensurate with the top players at their positions in the NFL. While we would also argue, and the team would correctly come back with a number that's below the top of their position groups in the NFL. And I think that's where these two players specifically and the position they play and what other guys have gotten around the NFL at their position really makes this negotiation difficult for both McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson, because they don't deserve $40 million a year, I don't think, because they're not in that group of players, even though they're very good. So then you have to figure out, well, how far below top of the market at defensive end and wide receiver do Terry McLaurin and Trey Hendrickson belong? And that's probably very difficult, because then they'll say, okay, well, 35 then. And the team is like, well, we're thinking more like 27, right? Like, so how do you close that gap? It could be a massive gap. And, deadlines usually make deals. And the fact that those long-term contracts I got to imagine the teams really need and want those players in camp and on their football teams this year. For them not to be able to get close enough for those players to report and get some long-term deals done. And we know that these contracts have been negotiated over for quite a while, especially with the Trey Hendrickson thing. And these players are dug in. And apparently the teams are dug in as well. When you start getting fined and start losing money, do you decide to come report to camp? If you report to camp, do you then just hold in? Diana Rossini has a lot of great reporting on it in a whole article about some of the offers, and talking about Hendrickson received 2 offers in a 24-hour span, none containing the guarantees past the first year that he was looking for. And I don't blame him if you're Trey Hendrickson. And I'm sure Trey Hendrickson and Terry McLaurin would sign deals that aren't top of the market money at their positions. But as that money's gotten out of control from some players like Jamar Chase and, even the TJ Watt deal and the Myles Garrett deal, I think it just gets really, really difficult, man. And Hendrickson said, quote, "I was more than willing to take less in some ways in order to make this work." But man, for Trey Hendrickson not to have any guarantees beyond year one, yeah, I can see why he's no longer in the state of Ohio and just working out and doing his own thing right now. So you can go find more on that reporting from Diana Rossini's article. And there's a whole lot more reporting out there about a lot of the players around the NFL. But good news for the Dallas Cowboys. Micah Parsons said, quote, "There's really not much movement on his contract talks, but he said, I want to be here. At the end of the day, they sign the checks. Let's see if they want me there or want me here." But he did report to camp. He also said, "I'm doing this for my teammates. This isn't for Jerry." So a little contentious there, but Micah Parsons is on the field for his teammates. This is his first go around with this negotiation. Trey Hendrickson's been doing this dance for quite a while with the Bengals, so I can see why they might look at this a little bit differently. One guy has reported and one guy has not, and Micah Parsons is going to get the most money at his position in the NFL. So it's going to look probably a lot like that Myles Garrett contract for Micah Parsons and the Dallas Cowboys. Here's an interesting note from camp. And I've been asked quite a bit about the 2 players that were, I believe, back-to-back picks at the end of round 1 in the 2025 NFL draft. I want to start with Josh Simmons and the Kansas City Chiefs, because this is fascinating. Josh Simmons was a top 10 talent in this draft, in my opinion. He was the best pure left tackle prospect in this draft, even ahead of Will Campbell, who went to the New England Patriots. Very high, top 5. I like Josh Simmons is a better prospect, in my opinion, as a pure left tackle. He had a torn patellar tendon last October, and that was the big reason he fell in the draft. And it's an injury that's tough for teams to believe that a player is going to very likely make a 100% recovery and be the same player he was. Now, the recovery timeline on getting back on the field wasn't as much of the problem, so it shouldn't be a complete shocker that Josh Simmons is out there on the field. But the Kansas City Chiefs in free agency give a lot of money to sort of a swing tackle type to be a stopgap left tackle for them, and Jalen Moore from the 49ers gave him quite a bit of money, too much money from what a lot of people looked at as a guy who was a backup previously in his career. That's how important this position is. And then Josh Simmons falls to them at the end of the first round of the draft. And he's already out there. He's the starter day one of training camp. He is with the first team line at left tackle. Now, that doesn't mean they're out of the woods just because they put him out there, because if you remember, the guy that's currently lining up next to Josh Simmons, Kingsley Suamataia, who's a player I was fond of pre-draft in 2024, he's lining up at left guard now with the first team. He was the guy that was lining up in week one as the starting left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. That did not go well for the Chiefs. They had a lot of problems, which is why they double dipped at left tackle in the offseason. But Kingsley Suamataia now might have found a home at left guard as the starter in between Josh Simmons and Creed Humphrey. Obviously, Trey Smith and now Jalen Moore is working on the right side there of that Kansas City Chiefs offensive line in camp. And so some competition, and that is the look of the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line, and they might have got themselves a heck of a steal if they got a long-term player that lives up to what his talent on tape said he could be in the NFL. And they got him at the end of the first round. And Patrick Mahomes has a long-term blindside protector. Chiefs might have got themselves one of the steals in the draft at the end of round one. All right, getting into the mailbag here, I want to talk about the other guy who at the end of round one, Jihad Campbell for the Philadelphia Eagles. We got a question there. And the QB Mount Rushmore, all-time quarterbacks, and just in the 2000s since Y2K, the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, in my opinion, as asked by those listeners. And we'll get into some more questions, hopefully, as well, next. This episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you presented by Yahoo Fantasy, because fantasy football, it's back, fired up. The group chat, get it going. Get your draft boards ready. Buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy, and I'm, of course, playing Yahoo Fantasy like I do, let's be honest, every year, and I have since the very late 1990s been playing Yahoo Fantasy football, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your 1 millionth league. Been using it for years. It's always the smoothest experience, and they keep upgrading it. In fact, they're upgrading a lot this year because to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. And it all begins August 4th. So stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy Football League at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That's yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. I'm going to go to YouTube in the comments, and one of our listeners here, NMF 5003, 5003, had a question about Jihad Campbell, and I kind of have the same question here that he does, but I think I might have some answers and some insight to this, because he says the Eagles, for once, have a good set of off-ball linebackers on their roster, and that was even before the draft. And I have to imagine Howie and the scouting department are aware of the bust rate of off-ball backers in the first round. With that said, it seems to me that the Eagles must have other plans for Jihad Campbell than using him as a traditional off-ball backer. My guess would be more of a role like Nolan Smith, even converting him to a full-time defensive end. What are your thoughts on how they plan to use Jihad Campbell? Well, we have some insight now from the first couple of days of training camp, and it does look like they are going to use Jihad Campbell as a true off-ball linebacker. Now, we know he has the athletic ability and has some background as a pass rusher. But knowing Vic Fangio and how he likes to use linebackers, and just seeing Jihad Campbell out there running around, and again, by the way, not only is he in shorts, Jihad Campbell in the shortest shorts I've ever seen for an NFL player. I mean, even back in like the 70s and 80s, and guys kind of had some short shorts. It was more like pads were on in camp too. So summertime at camp, Jihad Campbell's basically wearing swim trunks at practice. It looks interesting. I'm laughing because it looks kind of funny. I'm just not used to seeing guys with shorts that are that small, like taking it to the extreme. And I know that fashion trends change for young guys going into the NFL. And it's always fun. Like, remember how baggy stuff used to be? Go back and watch the NBA draft and the famous picture with it's like LeBron and Bosch and Wade, and how ridiculously large their suits are. It looked like David Byrne from 1984 with these huge, massive suits on. and then how slim everything got, and then like kind of coming back now. But shorts are getting short around the world. That is a trend right now. Jihad Campbell taking it to the extreme. He's wearing number 30 as well. And he's working with the off-ball backers. So I think the way they're going to utilize him is as an off-ball backer. And I'm sure Vic Fangio sees how big and athletic Jihad Campbell is, knowing he can play in reverse, knowing he can play in coverage, fly sideline to sideline, has size to stop the run, and obviously has skills as a pass rusher. I think he visions utilizing Jihad Campbell like he utilized, it takes a lot for me to bring up names like Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman, but he likes a do-it-all off-ball linebacker. So I think he wants to utilize him like that. And then I think when it benefits them, they will allow Jihad Campbell to rush the passer, whether it's as a blitzer up the middle through the A-gap or even line up with his hand in the dirt at times and take advantage of that. But I don't see a role of him moving to defensive end, at least based on what I know of Vic Fangio, and he does like a little bit bigger power defensive end, and then utilizing Jihad Campbell maybe in some of those roles. But I think he wants a big, fast, do-it-all linebacker. And I think that's what he's got now in a couple of them in Philadelphia. I was asked for my quarterback Mount Rushmore, and this could be an entire episode, and I'd be interested to hear how Matt feels about this. But on Twitter, Michael said, who would be your Mount Rushmore of QBs all time versus your Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks from 2000 onward? Well, as Michael also goes on to say, Tom Brady's got to be on both lists. Let's do the all-time first. It's Tom Brady, Joe Montana, very easily for me. I think Peyton Manning probably has to be on it. And you have to have somebody with my lifetime basically on the list, like founding fathers of the NFL type stuff. And whether it's Y.E. Tittle or, Bart Starr, who won a lot of Super Bowls, Terry Bradshaw, who won a lot of Super Bowls, you kind of lean toward the Super Bowls. You can't put Dan Marino on the list, I don't think. I think it's the same reason when we talk about the post-2000s Mount Rushmore, you got to only pick 4 guys. Like, I think Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, they would have somewhat of a claim. Their careers are not over, but they haven't won one either. So they're kind of in that Dan Marino category right now for me in the post-2000. So Brady, Montana, Peyton Manning, and I think I got to go Johnny Unitas, because he was the one that when I was growing up, it was always like, well, he was the all-time great before the new greats, before Joe Montana. And Johnny Unitas did play at the end of his career and won in the Super Bowl era as well, even though most of his body of work was, a founding father and pre-Super Bowl era stuff. So I think you got to go Johnny Unitas in the 4th spot with Brady, Montana, and Peyton Manning. Post-2000 Mount Rushmore, again, Tom Brady's on the list. Mahomes already on the list, could retire tomorrow, and he's got that claim probably into perpetuity. And you could probably argue Mahomes could be on the list instead of Peyton Manning in the all-time list. Then, I'm leaning towards guys who at least won a Super Bowl. People forget Aaron Rodgers' end of his career has been really weird. Aaron Rodgers was thought of to be maybe the greatest quarterback of all time at one point, when he was at his height and he's winning MVPs and he had that recent Super Bowl win, and you thought there might be more Super Bowl wins for him, and it has not happened. Aaron Rodgers is the guy with Mahomes and Brady. And my 4th would be Drew Brees. And he did get his Super Bowl title. And there's a ton of other quarterbacks you could probably name, but I'm pretty firm on this. The more I think about it, with Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees in my post year 2000 quarterback Mount Rushmore in the NFL. Coach Johnson on Twitter said, tell Williamson this happened when he comes back. Yeah, because Williamson hasn't had a lot of internet service either with him. He's far away on vacation. And it would be fun to be like, wow, man, crazy news, Matt. Alex Highsmith and draft picks for Micah Parsons. Yeah, I don't think that's likely to happen, especially with how much money they've already paid TJ Watt there in Pittsburgh. But that would be funny. Some other people going in on Williamson. Mr. Controversy himself says, with no Williamson, how about a 30-minute podcast about how the 49ers are so much better than the Steelers and how ridiculous it would be for anyone to say, quote, Kenny Pickett is better than Brock Purdy. Now, look, to Williamson's credit, after a half season of Brock Purdy, he thought they were at least similar and that Kenny Pickett could be better than Brock Purdy. And he's on record saying that then. He's also on record saying how wrong he was and that Kenny Pickett wasn't the guy and that Brock Purdy is pretty darn good. And he got that one very, very wrong. So appreciate you pointing that out. Once again, Mr. Controversy, and maybe we'll have to bring it up to Matt Williamson. Not going to spend all 30 minutes of this podcast on that one. What else do we got here? How about JDS says, besides a Penix injury, do we think Kirk Cousins starts any games this year for the Falcons or another team? So the question is, over under Kirk Cousins starts being 0.5 for the 2025 season. I'm smashing the over on that. Even without a Penix injury, because we know how things go with young quarterbacks in the NFL. We haven't seen enough of Michael Penix to be like, oh, he's, of course, obviously really good and would never get benched possibly ever. Like, that's one of the things that could possibly happen. And it's a little reminder in the YouTube comments and the arguments between Bucs fans and Falcons fans after our NFC South episode. You're not out of the woods yet with your young quarterback. You think Michael Penix is going to be really good. Does he have a stretch where he doesn't look great? And you've got this veteran quarterback who's now another year removed from his Achilles injury that is a capable NFL starter and probably one of the best 32 starters still in the NFL. And you know that Kirk Cousins would tell you that. So whether it's a trade, maybe there's a huge camp preseason injury with a quarterback, they make a trade for Kirk Cousins, whether it's Penix getting benched. Obviously, every player in the NFL is one play away from getting hurt, and that's one of the paths, but we're not even talking about an injury path for Kirk Cousins to play for the Falcons this year. Or a team just decides that they want to make a move for a veteran quarterback before the trade deadline. I got to believe that Kirk Cousins starts a football game this year in some kind of a way. And when you build your roster and you open camp, you think it's going to go a certain way. And for a lot of teams, very quickly, in fact, they realize, man, you know what? This is not it. This is not what I'm looking for. And maybe some teams just realize that they can get a bargain of a deal for a quarterback and not have to fight free agency, not have to fight the draft to get a veteran player that's maybe a stopgap for them, not only the rest of this year, but for next year that could still draft the quarterback that eventually, Michael Penix's Kirk Cousins in a new location. I could absolutely see that happen before the trade deadline. Another quick note on camp. There's no quarterback controversy or competition, apparently, with the New York Giants. Russell Wilson, he's the guy. And he's going to start the season as a starter. Jackson Dart's going to have to bide his time and potentially even have a full redshirt season is the sound of it. Now, again, you can make a good plan. And once you see it go south for you, and once you realize, well, we're not winning games with Russell Wilson anyway, let's go put the rookie out there. He's had a month. He's had a chance to look. We got to see what we got in Jackson Dart. If we're doing the same over-under thing, Jackson Dart's going to start some games. I'd put the over-under on Jackson Dart starts for the Giants at 5.5 games. He will start some games. Will it be in the first half of the season? I don't know. And if you're the Giants, you need to win some games early. If you're the Giants coaching staff, you're the Giants GM, and you got a really good defensive front, and you got to lean on that, and you can't have a rookie out there making mistakes to start the year. But if that doesn't work with Russell Wilson, you got to make a quick flip and develop your rookie quarterback, your rookie first-round quarterback you moved up to get in Jackson Dart. All right. Thanks to all the questions. Appreciate everybody out there, all the everydayers, and hanging with me solo on today's program. Matt Williamson back from vacation. He'll be at Steelers training camp in Latrobe, PA, in the dorms on Monday. We'll be breaking down everything going on around the NFL. And of course, you can get involved in next week's mailbag. Hit us up at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL. Drop a comment on YouTube. Subscribe while you're there. Matt and I back Monday right here. Peacock and Williamson.